on to your socks, people, because I'm about to knock it off with my amazing history facts, because today is the day that I shine. Today's my day, guys. I have been waiting for such a long time to sit down and talk about this without somebody laughing at my face and going, nerd. Who's the nerd now? Oh wait, that's still me. Anyways, welcome back to History Sunday. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics of history that I was obsessed with growing up as a kid. I mean, I was obsessed. In like an unhealthy way, I think. But today we're going to talk about the Crusades and what was the reason behind it and the truths and the origins of it, because I feel like I was lied to my whole childhood about it. So we're just gonna crack open the books and just talk about it. Okay, before we get into this video, I do have a few disclaimers and things to think about. First disclaimer is I am by no means a historian, but I do try my best to make sure all my facts are straight and that all my sources are cited and that everything that I intake is legit and not some bullshit off of Wikipedia. The second thing to think about is that I will be covering some sensitive topics on the basis of war and the horrible outcomes of the Crusades. And then the third thing is I will be covering different religious groups that had a part in the Crusade or that were affected heavily by the Crusades. And if you're one of those assholes that think your religion is better than others, you can kindly fuck off, because I'm not about racist assholes. Again, if you're someone who's like, my religion is better than yours, exit stage right, please, and make sure the door hits you on the way out. So those are just a few things for you to keep in mind. Let's get into this video and let's have fun with it. Who, what, when, why, where are the Crusades? So who were the Crusades? The Crusades were this like military group that was started by the Catholic Church in the late 11th century to go on this expedition to take back the Holy Land from the Muslims. Because nothing says I'm a white European man sticking my nose in other people's and countries' business to say my religion is better than yours. In the 11th century, there was this guy named Pope Urban II, and he was giving this rousing speech. He called this council speech, and the council was called the Council of Clermont, and this was in France. And he was going on and on about the Muslims and how like they had taken over the Holy Land and the pilgrims were being slaughtered and the Christians and the Jews, they were just being like tortured and all these evil things that the Muslims were doing. Like he was just piling it on thick, and he was just like, Muslims, bad people, guys, we need to go and take this land back. Oh, by the way, if you do, and for every Muslim you kill, guess what? I will give you a plenary indulgence. For those who don't know, back in the day, this was medieval ages, right? So like the majority of people in Europe were superstitious beings. They believed that, and in order to get to heaven, they had to buy their way in. So like if you wanted to have confession being said, you would have to pay a priest to say your confession. If you like wanted to get to heaven without, having to work for your penance, I suppose, you can bring in a witch and you can burn them, and then hey, plenary indulgence. So Pope Urban, who's a smart-ass man, he was like, for every Muslim you kill, there's a golden ticket for you to heaven, which is so messed up because I'm pretty sure Christ didn't die on the cross just for you to go murder other people to like make your way to heaven. I don't know, this isn't Willy Wonka shit, so settle down, Urban. Anyways, he's giving this rousing speech about Holy Land and Jerusalem and like under attack and blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden the crowd, they're just cheering. They're like, Deus Vult, which means God will it. I think we know where this is going. So Pope Urban is having this speech. People are like getting passionate about this, and then this one Bishop Adamort, he comes out of the group and he's like, I will lead the people to Jerusalem to take it back. That is where the first Crusade started. Now, before we really get into it more, let's talk a little bit more on the Muslims and who they were and why was Urban so interested about them. Before I go into this anymore, I do want to apologize if I mispronounce people's names or countries' names. I am not very good at names. I'm terrible at pronouncing anyone's names. I'm just trying, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the Seljuk Muslims and why was Pope Urban so interested in them, because historically speaking, like the Roman Empire didn't even really bat an eye towards the Holy Land or the Turks. Like it wasn't their problem. It was more Byzantine's problem. Again, going back a little bit, the Muslims had taken over the Holy Land, like Jerusalem, for over 400 years, like for centuries, and no one gave a shit. They were like, okay, like Europe was like having its own problems, the Byzantine world was having its own problems, and like the Turks and the Muslims are having their own problems. So let's talk a little bit about the Seljuk Muslims. Who were they? Now, this was during the 11th century. Again, this was when most of Asia Minor, northern Syria, was taken control over by the Seljuk Muslims. They had their own problems. So like they weren't really sticking their nose into Europe's business. They were having their own issues. Now, during this time, they were fighting with their rivals called the Shiite Fatimids. They were fighting over Jerusalem with their rival group. This war was going back and forth, and they were like, no, this is my land, this is my turf. And then in the end, the Sunni Seljuk Muslims, they had won. The Seljuks' ambitions of conquering like the Byzantine Empire and just like pretty much the world came to an end in 1092 AD when the Sultan died. The Sultan's name was Seljuk Sultan Melikshah. He had passed away. Because of his passing, this caused like local lords and nobles scrambling for power and the entitlements and all this bullshit. And then like in the end, the Shiite Muslims took over Jerusalem. And this was like, they took it over like a few months before the Crusaders came in, and they were like, hey, we're here. Melikshah's death like caused a huge stir because he was considered like one of the greatest conquerors, and I'm actually going to do a video on him later because he's a very fascinating leader, I think, and I don't know, I have no knowledge of him besides this, and I really want to learn more about him, so I might do a video on him later. All this was taking place in Baghdad. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this name, which was like a long ways away from where like even the Crusades were going to take place, or like where Jerusalem was. Like, I don't know, like again, why Pope Urban? Why? Okay, now that we have a little bit more background information on the Seljuk Muslims, let's go back into talking about Pope Urban and what his real reasoning for creating the Crusades was. Before Pope Urban came out with this whole rousing speech that would bring Shakespeare to tears, there was this man called Alexius Comnenus. He was the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, and he had sent letters and pleas to the Roman Church, to the emperor and to the Pope, pleading for help. Because during this time, the Byzantine Empire was growing gradually smaller because of the invadings of the Turks, and he was like, guys, I need help. Urban and like the emperor, they'd kind of brush it off. They'd be like, it's not our problem, that's your problem. Like, we have our own shit to deal with. Backing up the boat a little bit, around 1054 AD, the church split into two, which was called the Great Schism. The church split into two over the doctrine and the liturgical like disagreements around that. So like one of the issues that they had was that the Byzantine Rite, they do not believe that the Pope is the head of the church. That was just like one factors of why they split. We got the Roman Catholic Church, and then we've got the Orthodox Church. They were having their own issues, and they're like, you're not my problem. You decided to split away from us. Until Pope Urban did have a problem. Now, during this time, Pope Urban II was considered the unlawful or the unchosen Pope, and that the chosen Pope, that the real Pope, was Pope Clement III, who was in Rome at the time. And people were like, he's the true Pope, not this Urban. Pope Urban was at war with his own people, and he was like, how do I become like the rightful Pope in people's eyes? And he had this idea. He's like, listen, not only do I want to be the Pope of Rome, but I also want to be the head of the Orthodox Church as well. Like he was an ambitious guy, and so he then created this idea. He was like, why fight each other when we can unite against the common enemy, which happens to be the Muslims? Oh yeah, and listen, what are the objectives of the Crusades? Like, what can we benefit from it? They're like, not only can we check the spread of Islam, we can conquer the pagans, we can convert them, can take control over the Holy Land. Oh yeah, and then guys, we can have this thing called plenary indulgence, which is the golden Willy Wonka ticket to heaven. That's how, and I think that was one of the main reasons why Crusades were started. Again, I don't don't understand why, because like the pilgrims never had a real issue with going in and out of Jerusalem. Like I mentioned before, the Muslims had taken over Jerusalem for like over 400 years before Rome was interested. Like I mentioned before, nobody gave a shit. They were like, we have our own problems, until Pope Urban was like, oh hey guys, you're my problem now. Pope Urban saw an opportunity and he took it, that's why. Okay, so Urban, he threw out a speech, everyone was roused. What happens next? So this guy by the name of Peter the Hermit, and he was from France, he was really into this whole idea of the Crusades, and so he would go from town to town. He would lie about like the atrocities that, you know, that happened in the Holy Land, and he even said like, I saw like the Muslims like eating people, and they would chop up children's head and put them on spikes on the walls, like, you know, rape the women, blah blah blah. And like he said all these horrible lies about them, when interesting fact, there is no proven evidence that he was actually in the Holy Land. Like this guy was just full of shit. Peter the Hermit, like he told people that like Christ was the one who came to him and gave him like this vision of being like, you will lead the people and you would save them and blah blah blah, like this is your destiny. Thousands of people left. I mean, tens of thousands of like villagers and peasants and, you know, mercenaries and not knights. They left their homes to go and fight for this cause. Peter, he was just like too enthusiastic about this shit, and he's like, no, we gotta go now, we gotta go now. This was springtime in the medieval ages. There were no such things as stores or fridges, so you can imagine everyone was poor as shit. Like people became so broke for the Crusades, like it was not worth it, guys. Peter, he was gathering peasants in Cologne. This was called the People's Crusade or the Peasants' Crusade, and we're gonna leave it at that for a second. We're gonna jump to our second guy who created another army for the First Crusade. And this guy, he had daddy issues or some shit, like he was an asshole. His name was Walter Saint-Honoir, and Walter, he was a dick. This is springtime again, keep in mind. And he had his own army, and he went through Hungary okay-ish, like he was able to go through the border with his men, and he stopped at like in Belgrade. Belgrade was considered like the doorway or the doorstep to the Byzantine Empire, and like the governor, can you imagine this army just showing up at your doorstep being like, hey, open up, it's me. And he's like, what? He was so confused because he was expecting this army to come like a year later in September. He's like, you guys are so early, can you like, what are you doing? And they're like, we're here to fight. And he's like, all right, chill. And so he was like, how about this? You guys wait patiently while I write a letter to Constantinople to see what's going on, because you guys are way too early. You need to like chill. And you know what they did? They went and they raided the town. Third man we're gonna talk about. I hate him. This guy, his name is Count Emico. He was from Germany. He's an asshole. He heard about Peter's preaching, and he heard about Peter's little crusade, and he was inspired, and so he gathered his own little crusade. They weren't even like a few miles in when they got bored of the whole crusade idea, that they were like, guys, let's go pillage and destroy a bunch of these Jews. And that's what they did. They went from town to town in Germany, sacking and raiding the Jewish community. I mean, it was a massacre, and it was just disgusting. It was disgusting what this man did. Catholic Church was opposed to this 100%. I mean, there are stories of different bishops. There was like Bishop of Speyer who gave his protection to the Jews. He said like, you're not allowed to kill them, blah blah blah. And there was like a bishop, you're gonna laugh at this name, but the Bishop of Worms, he had brought a bunch of Jews, like over, what was it, 800 Jews into his home, and he tried to fortify his home, but unfortunately the Count's soldiers broke in and they massacred all these Jews. I mean, it was just disgusting. It was abhorrent. Poor Jews, they can never catch a break. Like, y'all need to leave them alone. Count Emico, he took his soldiers, they got to Hungary, and like the Hungarian king was pissed. He heard about all this shit that was going on, and he was like, I am not letting you through. And so Emico was like, we're the hot shit, we can take over this. And the Hungarian king was like, I want to see you try. So they laid siege to the Hungarian Empire, but the Hungarians were better trained, better equipped, and they were able to destroy Count Emico's, like, to the man. I think that's what I read. First Crusade. So they get to like the Byzantine Empire, and this was near Nicaea, and then the Seljuk army were like, who are these white people? And so they ended up slaughtering them, and that is how 1096 AD AD, and that was like the first crusade. And let me tell you, Pope Urban did not see this coming. This was just a massive shit show, guys. If anything, the first crusade or the People's Crusade was more along the lines of like a trial run. What's it with these people? Like, I don't understand. I really don't. Okay, guys, you made it to the end of this video. I'm sorry this was a bit long, but this was kind of a subject I wanted to talk about for a while because it was, I don't know, it was just sitting on my noggin for a while and I had a lot of, thoughts about it. And I'm someone who's very passionate about history and truth, and this is something that I wish people within my faith would talk more about, because if I'm being completely honest, I grew up with the Crusades being like our heroes. I remember our 6th grade confirmation teacher being like, we are the crusaders of our faith. Like, we must take inspiration from the Crusades. I don't want to imitate them. They're assholes. And in my eyes, Pope Urban can go choke on a spike, because he was an evil man for creating this military group to go and free the Christians from these evil people. If you made it to the very end of this video, you're a trooper. I will see you guys next time. Stay warm, hug a llama, scream into the void. That helps with stress. Be kind to yourselves. I will see you guys later. Bye.